I need you on the street.
Okay, everyone, if we could please take your seats. We're going to go ahead and get started.
Okay. Where is everyone today?
We're going to call a meeting of the Sacramento Area Transportation Authority meeting to order. Madam Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Yes. Directors Carr, Frost, here. Gatewood,
Here.
Guetta, Hanson, Harris, Howe,
Here.
Hume,
Here.
Kennedy,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Natoli, Peters,
Here.
Sandhu,
Here.
Chenier,
Here.
Cerna,
Here.
and Suen.
All right, here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Director Cerna, if you mind leading us in the pledge. Okay, Madam Clerk, could you go ahead and read the cable statement?
Absolutely. The meeting of the Sacramento Transportation Authority is cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on the Comcast Consolidated Communications, and the AT&T Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed captioned and webcast at metrocable.tv. Today's meeting will replay Sunday, February 16th at 2 p.m. and Monday, February 17th at 2 p.m. on Channel 14. Members of the audience wishing to address the board may sign up using the speaker slips located in the back of the room. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. We're on to comments on items not on the agenda, and I have one speaker signed up to speak at this time, Jeffrey Tartaguia. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, board. I put out my 20 census t-shirt to remind everybody that the importance of you guys talking to people about being counted on there. Also, in this political scenario seen through there, I will also offer right now that the measure, I believe not G, but the Los Rios measure, you had 2 flyers go out there for that. This is what the STA needs to have, is making it as simple as possible for a transportation tax here for Sacramento. You're going to hear me repeating that over and over again, keeping it as simple as possible. One of the things, even though I know Patrick Kennedy, there he is right there sitting down right now, is talked with the Los Angeles people, back in 2016 when it failed. You guys didn't do the grassroots effort. You now got 100 people out here that are interested, but it's right now February, and you still don't have an ordinance ready to go to convince people about getting the roads repaired and what we're going to do for the next decade, even though this is a 40-year tax proposal that's going on right now. This is something that I think, it seems to me like in December you were startled that you had so many people that wanted to talk about this. This should have been a discussion that took place years ago. It should have been ready by last November. And so, yes, I do chastise the board a little bit in saying, hey, if you're going to develop a timeline, the next thing that I will be talking to William about, when and if this fails, what is the next effort? Because you still need this for the region. So please, as Patrick over there suggested about, while the animal's still alive, you're carving it apart. You guys need to figure out, and you're not uniform and you're not fronted, but the most important thing is getting the damn roads fixed so that there's not potholes, and knowing there's going to be more of this. And the last thing I will offer you to, once again, read the Sacramento News Review, page 6 again, and you'll see another transportation article discussion taking place.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Appreciate your recognition of the importance of this matter.
Oh, and if you guys didn't know, the last time I was watching you on TV, I just need to note that I am watching you. I don't necessarily have to be here to see what the heck you're doing.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Okay, next item is the Executive Director's report. Mr. Kempton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Just wanted to cover a couple of things. The next meeting of our Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee is on February 20th. We always like to encourage members of the public to attend, and that participation is encouraged. If you go to www.sacitoc.org, you can get the specific times and the location. I know that Mr. Hom had been keeping you updated on the local partnership program, the California Transportation. This is, by the way, an SB1 funded program. The California Transportation Commission has responsibility for the adoption of the guidelines, and a group of self-help counties, which involve the Sacramento Transportation Authority, has been pushing the commission to move back the schedule, and they did that. Applications are now due June 12th, and the program will not be adopted by the CTC until the early December timeframe. More significantly, we were pushing for a distribution of the dollars, 85% of them based on formula and 15% based on a competitive process. The commission was considerably in the other direction, but they did agree on a 60% formula and 40% competitive program, and those guidelines will be at the March 25th, 26th meeting of the Commission. There's also a looking ahead section in the Executive Director's report, but Mr. Chair, I think you can look at that at your convenience, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kempton. Any questions for the director? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move to the next item. We have a consent item, the action summary for the February 5th, 2020 Governing Board meeting. Any questions about that? I don't have any speakers signed up to speak, so if there's any motion to adopt. Moved by Vice Chair Natoli. Seconded by Director Chenier. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. All right, next item, item 4. Status of the development of our proposed Measure A 2020 ordinance and transportation expenditure plan. You're up again, Mr. Kempton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. You'll remember at the December 12th, 2019 meeting, the Townsend, Calkin, Tapio team presented a discussion draft of the proposed Measure A 2020 transportation expenditure plan. And then at the January meeting, the last regular meeting, we brought the Measure A 2020 ordinance forward for discussion purposes only. So I wanted to spend some time today giving you an update, and I'm going to go over to the podium so that I can operate the slides. So I should tell you that you need to disregard much of the information that was included in my staff report, as this process has been extremely fluid, and it literally changes, if not hourly, certainly daily. So there are constant changes occurring to both the expenditure plan and to the ordinance, for that matter. I would like to express my appreciation to members of the public, to the stakeholders and others who have been very positive in providing input. Notably Wayne Lewis from Caltrans, who pointed out about 6 typographical errors in those documents that after all the times I've looked at it, I have missed. And so thank you, Mr. Lewis, for your continued review of this information. But I am pleased to announce that yesterday the Measure A Ad Hoc Committee, on a 7-to-1 vote, endorsed an agreement with the California Alliance for Jobs and the SAC-RT to move forward with a 60-40 expenditure plan, with 60% going to streets, roads, and highways, and 40% going to rail and transit. And I have a summary of the proposal here for you and I'll go over it with you. I'm not getting, there we go. So what we have here is a proposed Measure A transportation expenditure plan, and down at the bottom you'll see that the split of the dollars contained in this plan is 60% streets, roads, and highways, and 40% for transit and rail. The categories are listed down the left-hand side of the project, but I'll go over them with you briefly. The local streets and roads category, which includes 2 subcategories of local street, road repair, and transformative system improvements, those dollars divide divided by formula, will receive under this plan 48.2% of the revenues for a total of $3.8 billion. The local projects of regional significance are a professional advisory group. The public works directors are working on a formula. We have a meeting of the PAG scheduled for Tuesday, and they are going to be presenting the results of their efforts at that meeting. Second category is the SAC-RT maintenance operations and transformative system improvements, which will receive 23.4% of the revenues under this proposal for a total of $1.856 billion. Next category is congestion relief improvements. There are two components of that. There's a transit and rail congestion improvements piece and a highway congestion improvements piece. The total for congestion relief is 25.3%, or just over $2 billion at $2.010 billion. Senior and disabled transportation services, and I'm pleased to report that we finally have agreement with SAC-RT and Paratransit on language which will describe these services, continues to receive $250 million, or 3.2%. Now, when you divide these dollars up and try to assign a percentage for the different components, the streets, roads, and highways, and transit and rail, there are certain items that we are funding that don't split up easily, among them air quality, the American River Parkway, the Regional Mobility Center, and administration. And so what we've got proposed in the plan for air quality at this point is $171.5 million. That's an increase of $50 million over the previous amount, and I'll come back to that and the American River Parkway item in just a moment. But the American River Parkway, we include $22 million for continuation of the $1 million a year that currently goes from the existing measure for the Parkway. Regional Mobility Center, $20 million, and then administration, off the top, that number actually will be a little higher given the dollars that are there. But I want to explain the difference in the total at the bottom. The air quality in American River Parkway, those sources of money for this proposal are would come out of the Sacramento County Transportation Mitigation Fee Program, which is proposed to be extended in the measure. But this is the proposal, and again, I think it's very significant that Regional Transit and Sacramento Alliance for Jobs, along with the members of the ad hoc committee, agree that this is a reasonable way to proceed. And Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank you, Will, for your hard work in pulling everyone together. And I want to commend the folks on the ad hoc and RT, Alliance for Jobs, Paratransit, SAC Moves, and other members of the public that have weighed in thus far. I know we're going to still take more comments, but I think it's been a step in the right direction, and I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions for Mr. Kempton from the board about this. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Council. I'm sorry. I just highlighted Director Hume, and then Director Stern.
Will, you said you may come back to this, but I was just going to ask for the amount going to AQMD, why that figure changed and taken off the top as opposed to a percentage?
Yeah, the Air Quality Management District has, their needs assessment showed 127.5, but it was based on a 30-year total, and they've been very consistent in arguing that they need additional monies to fund the programs, which are obviously very beneficial for air quality for the county, but also serve as a major opportunity to leverage money. They have a very good track record in terms of leveraging money. So as one of the things that's changed in this expenditure, in the ordinance and the transportation expenditure plan, is the continuation of that mitigation fee program that's part of the existing measure. So that opens up some additional dollars. We estimate about $331 million that we can add to the program, but it won't be available until the last years of the program, and it also will require a nexus study before it can be implemented. So we have proposed as intent language in the ordinance that an additional $50 million would be provided for the Air District to support their programs, and the $22 million that I described for the American River Parkway. They come off the top in the sense that it's not possible to divide them up by streets, roads, and highways, and transit and rail.
Okay, so the genesis of the change then came from a request from the district?
Yes.
Okay. And then my second question is, do you have a breakdown of today's proposal in a format of what we've grown accustomed to looking at?
I can certainly get one in very short order.
Doesn't have to happen today, but at some point prior to us taking a vote on this, I'd like to see it broken out that way. Thank you.
Totally agree. Thank you, Director Hume. Director Cerna, and then we'll go next.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Will, you mentioned that the $22 million for the American River Parkway is more or less, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's more or less a status quo amount from the existing measure, correct?
The existing measure provides $1 million a year, and this proposal, if it could go forward as part of a continuation of the fee program, would continue that $1 million.
But at the same order of magnitude, right?
Yes.
So you and I and others have had conversations recently about at least my perspective on the Parkway, and I've conveyed to you that a lot has changed since the original measure was conceived and adopted and the appropriation was made. Most notably, a great number of my constituents feel afraid to use the Parkway for active transportation, whether it be walking, running, cycling, along the lower reach, especially between the Guy West Bridge and the confluence. So why would the amount stay the same if the condition of that particular element of our transportation infrastructure for active transportation, why does it make sense for the amount to stay the same? It seems to me that we'd want to perhaps focus more and have a more commensurate amount appropriated to bring people back to that part of the Parkway to cycle all the way from parts of eastern Sacramento County into downtown Sacramento.
Sure. Two responses. First of all, we have developed some language, and you and I have spoken about that to provide a greater focus on those sorts of issues that you're talking about. But the language that's included as part of the extension of the fee program says at least $1 million. So we recognize that as that program gets put together, as we move closer to the end of the existing measure, it may be very appropriate to add more money from the fee program for that purpose, assuming it can satisfy a nexus study that says it's appropriate to spend those dollars. I cannot imagine why it would not, as that would be a very effective mitigation measure.
So the nexus study is a legal mechanism, part of a legal trigger that would have to be satisfied to do that. But what about the process to do that? How would that happen?
So what I have written in as a process, and certainly happy to get any comments on this, is that beginning in 2037, the authority, working in coordination with the jurisdictions, would initiate the process of a nexus study to look at the appropriate mitigation associated with development going from April 1st of 2039 to March 31st of 2061. It'd be the same process that was observed for the development of the mitigation program that's included in the existing measure. And then it says that prior to March 31st of 2039, there would be a program in place and an allocation plan for the distribution of those dollars, which would be decided as part of that process.
So, in response to both those, your two answers in the last 2 minutes here, is it a distinction without a difference? I'm really trying to understand how what you're suggesting here is going to really be different because of the difference in the condition of the Parkway, and I guess I'm not hearing that.
Remember after Measure A, you couldn't use current Measure A funds for the American River Parkway. We took Phil's language that allows them to use as much money out of their money for the Parkway as they want to. So it's money they can use for that.
Well, I don't know if you heard that or not, but
Angel on your shoulder.
first of all, the Parkway is an eligible project as part of this expenditure plan that local jurisdictions can expend their dollars on. But I think what you mean is how we would accomplish that focus that you talked about. And I have language that I want to review with you that I think will provide for that focus as part of this process. And it was not my intent to put any restrictions on the amount of money that would go to the Parkway, but rather to provide an opportunity for additional dollars. And certainly as you build that new program and allocate and determine an allocation plan for those fees, more could be sent to the American River Parkway.
No, I appreciate that. I think you can tell from the theme of my questions what's especially important with this exercise for this supervisor. And I would imagine I'm not the only one. I know Mr. Harris has also expressed over the years great concern for the Parkway, its condition, and an intent to make sure that our common constituency is able to use it, and it's safe and it's clean for them to use. And I know there are other representatives on the board of supervisors that also represent stretches, and it really needs to work in its entirety for it to I think, satisfy the intent of it being a legitimate transportation corridor for active transportation. So I'll just stop there. I think you get the gist of where I'm going with this.
Sure.
Thank you.
And I will tell you, Director Cerna, that I've heard a lot of input over the past several months. Nobody has said, don't fund the American River Parkway.
Okay, Director Kennedy.
It's not an allocation. It's an eligible project. Right.
Yes, Will. I believe that you are in receipt but haven't had an opportunity necessarily to look at some proposed changes, not to the transportation expenditure plan, but the language in the draft ordinance from some of the advocates, SMART and I believe SAC Forward. We're being asked to continue the public hearing for the draft ordinance and the TEP. Will that give you the opportunity to look at that document and see where we could possibly make some of those changes and additions?
Sure, and there's no action, by the way, proposed from staff for this this meeting. I did get a chance, frankly, to meet with the SAC Move Smart folks. They have done an extensive amount of work and gone through the ordinance and the expenditure plan suggesting changes, and I have reviewed those, and I think there's some opportunities for us to improve the language that we have. So time is of the essence, certainly, because we're looking at a March adoption date. But I do intend to go through that and frankly consider other input as well for making those adjustments.
Great, thank you.
All right, Director Hansen.
Thank you. First, Will, I know you've just been working day and night on this, and I want to say thank you. You came as our interim executive director, and you ended up in the deep end with the team, and you've been treading water and doing as much good as you can every day. And I want to thank you and all the people that have been working on this. I think it's a huge breakthrough in a lot of ways that we're at this point. I do want to echo Supervisor Cerna, just the Parkway. It's one of the things that I hear about daily. Even though the county, and I respect that it's their piece of property to operate and run, but it would be great for all of our residents in Sacramento County to know that the Parkway is a priority through this. And so I don't know what to do about that, but I do know that it is a major crisis that is unfolded before our eyes, and this is one of the few ways we can help supplement the heroic efforts of the county to really, and led by Supervisor Cerna, to make it better. But the last thing I'd say is the 60-40 split, I think, is very, it's tremendous progress. And one of the things that's embedded in that 60% is the local street piece. And we know streets and roads are used by people who are pedestrians and bicyclists. I don't really know, and maybe this is something for SAC Moves and the SMART folks, to tell us what the value of the of what they've been talking about is for those percentages, how much improvement do we think we'll get in pedestrian safety? I know Ms. Howell and I had a back and forth at the last meeting about complete streets. I'm a big believer in sidewalks and safe places to cross. I know she is too. We just disagree about how we prioritize that through this measure. And it's not lost on me either that the polling showed extremely strong support for safe routes to school. So how we think that through and tell that story is one of the things that seems unclear at the moment, just based on the top line. But I know we're going to have a little bit of opportunity to think about how to drill into this, and I guess Mr. Hume's comment about breaking this out a little bit more might help. But as you work with the PAGs and the city managers, maybe they can give us an indication of how much of that could go to, like in the city's portion, our trails are covered by our local street and roads. So when we're going to build and operate, mostly it's going to come from that, unless we get a grant and we still have to have matching funds. So I don't have an answer. I don't think you do either, but I think it would be helpful at elucidating for the public who is really concerned about pedestrian safety, bike safety, active transportation, what portion of that may come back to those kind of projects, because it may be substantial. You know, you see 48% for local streets and roads. Is there 5 to 7%, 10% of that will be used to build sidewalks and safe crossings? I think it's a fair thing to try to think through.
And Director Hansen, I can respond because I think it's a positive response, not in terms of the specific dollar amounts, and those dollar amounts will vary by jurisdiction, and depending on what the local jurisdictions choose to spend that transformative system improvements piece of the program on. Number one is streets and roads maintenance and rehabilitation and safety. And there is a very significant requirement for the expenditure of dollars for the first 5 years on that purpose, for that purpose. After the first 5 years, at least half of the money must continue to go for that purpose as well, unless a jurisdiction has achieved a payment condition index of 70 for their system. But again, that's up to the jurisdiction in terms of how they want to. We purposely built in flexibility there, and I just want to make sure that we have everything covered in the description of that subcategory so that it can achieve some of the things that folks are talking about. Complete streets is in there, but it's only in there as complete streets. And so there's potentially an opportunity to define that in more specific detail and move forward from that front. So I certainly understand your comments, and I think there's an opportunity to beef that up.
Thank you. And because we've got Steve and Amal and Glenda here from SAC Moves, maybe that's something we can think about how to show that, so that when they have a chance to weigh in on the plan as you've helped develop it in partnership with so many people, that we have a good narrative there, because the Johnny Cash Trail is obviously an important thing that was funded in Folsom. The city of Sacramento is working on its trails. I know Rancho Cordova has wonderful trails, Mr. Gatewood, as does Elk Grove, and so it's not something that is clear, but I know we're doing it, so thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Natoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. One, Will, you pointed out that at the subcommittee meeting that the ad hoc committee, I thought it was the same thing, right?
No, legally.
Okay, legally. Okay, legally, the ad hoc committee, not the subcommittee, stand corrected, that it wasn't unanimous, and I'm not desirous of calling out why it wasn't unanimous as much as to understand, because that says to me that there's lingering concern, at least at that level, at the ad hoc level, but it's certainly going to reflect itself here if those issues aren't adequately addressed. And so I guess I'd just like a little more elaboration on where we still have differences. Granted, having the Alliance for Jobs and Regional Transit, find some consensus is not unimportant, but I guess to understand when this body, over the next few weeks comes together to make a determination that I think is, if most of us aren't on the same page, that doesn't reflect well for the future where we're going to go with this to the ballot. So I guess I'm trying to understand, Will. Again, recognize there's still work in progress up to the very moment that you're at the podium here today. But can you maybe share a little bit? And if not, maybe one of the ad hoc committee members could share some of that. So.
Well, Director Natoli, I would just, I would respond. The difference between the discussion we had at the meeting yesterday and where we started in terms of where the group was is remarkable. I think people are beginning to come together, and there was a lot of focus on consensus and recognizing that we have to all get behind something that hopefully is achievable. Obviously, there are people who still have very strong views with respect to their outlook on how the money should be spent. I certainly respect that, and that was the difference.
Will, does that reflect again? Again, because it's been stated here at the dais and past meetings regarding, what return comes back jurisdictionally versus what may be contemplated either as having made the list or not made the list in any particular percentage?
No, I certainly don't want to speak for anybody with respect to that issue. I think the issue is more of the programmatic nature, and obviously individuals have certain concerns and want to see certain activities and projects funded. But I think we've done a lot to achieve a sort of a consensus agreement on how the dollars should be distributed.
And Vice Chair Natoli, if I could just add, I think I want to commend all the stakeholders that were involved, the ad hoc committee, advocating passionately for their communities, RT and California Alliance for Jobs, who are also advocating for their membership and stakeholders. And I think as Mr. Kempton mentioned, I think the focus came around compromise, and the discussions about exact percentages on returns to source wasn't so much as a focus as what were we going to accomplish regionally, from improving roads, from congestion relief and transit, improving air quality. Those I guess I would call them big picture items.
Okay,
so
that helps. And just one other question then, and it kind of goes to the discussion that's kind of been laced in here relative to achieving a 70 PCI, Pavement Condition Index, and then freeing up the jurisdiction then to look to do other projects that would fall in those categories. Has there been any discussion either at the ad hoc committee or amongst the group of public works and transportation representatives regarding the other end of the scale? And I spoke to this at our December meeting, but in the rural portions of the county, I've got several hundred lane miles of 0 to 24 PCI, which is failed or very poor. But I'm not the only one. I'm sure in other areas in the county, but talking specifically in the rural portions. And, if we can't do better than 0 to 10 or 0 to 15, and others are going to be pushing 70 so they can free up the money, again, that points to some disparity, in the overall measurement here. And I would just say that I don't know if anybody's talked to that. I certainly put it out there for this body at the time, and recognize there have been a lot of discussions that have been focused on some of the other critical matters. But I guess I would just ask as to whether there's been any discussion about that, because if you can't even get to 25 and others are pushing 70, there's something wrong with that picture.
There has been discussion over the past several meetings regarding an approach similar to what you're suggesting. But what has won out in those discussions has been a fair share for all of the jurisdictions, and that's what's reflected in the document.
Okay. I accept your answer for today's purposes. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to thank you, Will. I think we're going to move to public comment. Did I have someone else?
Public comment first?
Yeah, I was going to take. Did you have more questions?
No, not
Did-
questions. I just have some stuff.
Okay, yeah, let's do public comment, and then we'll come back for further discussion.
And Mr. Chair, after the public comment, I can just very quickly go over some of the other changes that have been made in the ordinance and the TEP.
Okay. Well, do you want to do that now? So
We should do that first so the public can comment on the presentation.
I'll be brief.
okay.
So we moved of the major categories, and you can see the categories on the slide. We did move some of those around. We, for example, created the new category, subcategory of local projects of regional significance, eliminating the system access improvements. We now have both a transit and rail and a highway congestion improvement subcategory under congestion relief programs. So some general adjustments of that nature. The one change that is, I think, significant from the standpoint of a commitment to maintenance, rehabilitation, and safety is that the version that is out on our website now has a requirement for 50% of an expenditure for maintenance, rehabilitation, and safety for the first 5 years. That was changed to 90. So for the first 5 years, 90% of the dollars that come from that major category, for the subcategory there, will have to go for maintenance, rehabilitation, and safety. And then for the remainder of the 40-year period, another 35 years, there's a 50% requirement. So it demonstrates a significant commitment to taking care of the existing system, and that's been included in the ordinance. We had I talked about the extension of the Sacramento County Transportation Mitigation Fee Program. Other changes, we moved some of the project items around a little bit to better fit into the categories. We did, as I mentioned earlier, come to agreement on language revisions to the senior and disabled transportation description. That was an accomplishment. We are working on the determination of an acceptable formula for the distribution of the dollars under the local projects of regional significance. Hope to make some good progress on that at our next professional advisory group meeting on Tuesday. And then we continue to consider proposed language changes from stakeholders for various sections of the ordinance and the TEP.
Thank you, Director Kempton. Director Kempton, is any other questions regarding those? Okay, great. We're going to go to public comment. I've got a number of speakers here signed up. For now, I think we'll go ahead and leave the 3 minutes, but if we get a bunch more, I'll take that into consideration because we have some members who may have to leave. First speaker I've signed up to speak is Jeffrey Tartagia, followed by Jim Crowder.
Hopefully I turned it the right way. What I'm going to speak about is I'm also participating in the master plan on aging. And the projection for the next 10 years is that community will be exceeding 5 to 10 million. So as you bring up these transportation needs, we are increasing by 100,000 literally daily of this going into being the senior category. It's just a heads up to you, like you bring about, is what we really would like to see the American River become the gem that it once was. These needs are great, and you need to realize that are also probably a large voting percentage is your senior community. That note is sitting up there because it's talking about targeted community activity related to the electoral. It's just some research that's been done through the UC centers and other projects through there. It just enlightens you to what messages you should be directing. 4 years ago, when we had the SB1 funds come in there, I reminded you that you needed to get the word out there where Measure A funds were being spent, because otherwise the Republican Party at that time really wanted to kill that off. You did a good job, I think, of making sure that Sacramento understood where Measure A funds were going at that time. Right now, it's not real clear when Measure A funds are going on. I just remind you of that in your sake for advertising, promoting, and everything else. And again, I do want to see in Sacramento County a transportation tax, and I do appreciate hearing that you have taken far more public input than I can offer 8 or 10 years ago. Just like with Sacramento RT, we had 3 or 4 of us that were talking. You now have at most of those meetings where you have 10, 20 or more people, just like here, 10 or 20 or more people that are interested in seeing where you are spending and seeing you better inform the public about transportation dollars.
Thank you. Jim Crowder, followed by Steve Cohn. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Crowder. I'm a member of the Consumer CPAC, but today I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I was pleased to hear the change on the 60/40. That was probably my major concern. But just a couple other items that I'd like to bring up. When you brought up when it comes to down to the local street and road, for the first 5 years, 90% of the funds go in that direction. My only question is, after that 5 years is up and it reduces to 50%, where do those other funds go?
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Those funds would go to, at the discretion of the local jurisdiction, to a program called Transformative System Improvements. It's actually described in the expenditure plan what they could be spent on. Among the items that are eligible are safe routes to school, are complete streets, are bike and ped, are signal synchronization, are street lighting. There's a whole range of projects, and you can look at the TEP and it'll tell you.
Okay, that does answer it. Just my thought, I would like to keep that 90%, maybe an additional 5 more years and make it 10 years, but that's, you guys made some good improvements, so that's good. As for what Mr. Natoli brought up, I live in Rancho Marietta, and you're correct on the rural roads. CPI, or PCI, excuse me, just for a review, poor standards or very poor is 0 to 24%. Poor is 25 to 49. 50 to 69 is at risk. 70 to 84 is good. And then, of course, 85 to 100 is excellent. I looked at a report up in Bend, Oregon. Their average, overall average, is 73%. And I would just like to challenge the ad hoc committee to see if we can raise our standards a little bit higher than what we have, and to, especially for the rural roads, 2 lanes, where we have no shoulders at all. It is a safety issue, and that would be nice to get that addressed. And you pretty much stole my thunder on the 60/40. I will be honest with you. I was a little critical on everything I was looking at, but it's good. I have to give you. I do have to give you credit. Just one more plug for what we deal with in Rancho Marietta. I'll be going home Highway 50 and then cutting down on Scott Road. Okay, it's been brought up many times, and I'm going to bring it up one more time, that yes, we could use some improvement on that. I want to say, and I haven't gone out to measure the roads, but with no shoulders, it might be 11 feet for each lane. And it's a safety issue, because if you have a breakdown, there's no safe place to pull over. You're just in the road, dead in the water. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, next speaker, Steve Cohn, followed by Suzanne Tobin. Hey, Steve.
Hello. Steve. Well, I was sort of prepared to respond to the agenda packet, but given the presentation, I think it's probably best to say we're just hearing for the first time about this compromise proposal. Well, Right. So I really don't know what to say about that, to be honest. And I think we'll have to.
We have that on film.
You have that on film. That I actually said that, and we'll have to think about it. I would note that in Measure A, the current Measure A, which was adopted back in '04 before the full extent of climate change was known, we were at 43% transit. So we have to explain to the public why we're actually putting less money into transit now going forward than we did back 16 years ago. So that's just my initial thought. But what I do want to say in following up on Patrick Kennedy's, Supervisor Kennedy's note earlier, we did provide Amel Wadwani and Roger Dickinson and a number of us, myself, worked on some language, used a few of our legal skills that haven't been sharply honed in recent years, but still can wrangle with a few legal aphorisms here and there. At any rate, we have submitted to your staff, and we're willing to talk about that and discuss possible changes. Basically, what we tried to do was take the policy framework that we proposed to you back in December and put that into ordinance language. And so it's really not that big a change to what's already there, but the ordinance and the plan are 30 pages or so. So we have red lines to that, and we'll look forward to following up on that. On Mr. Hansen's comment, we did give a lot of thought, and you'll see in our red line, thought to how to bring bike and ped more into the mix more expressly rather than just it potentially could have money. Contra Costa did a little differently. They set aside 11% of the entire amount, not just local roads, of the entire measure. We'll see how that does. That's up for a vote on March 3rd. We had suggested 10% back in our initial plan, but then in our revised plan, I'll wrap up quickly here, our ordinance language, we actually had you think of that maybe as fix it first, complete streets second. So fold the complete streets, bike ped, ADA all together. But it would be helpful to know from the different jurisdictions how much they were thinking of their local road money would go towards bike and ped, because right now we don't really know that. We know the total unmet needs were about $1 billion. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate your ongoing engagement on this. Next speaker is Suzanne Tobin, and then Glenda Marsh is up next.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Tobin. I'm with the Climate Coalition. And news of the day, the planet just had its hottest January ever on record. And I want to venture to guess that pretty much everybody in this room understands that we need to cut greenhouse gases drastically and quickly. It's time for not business as usual, how we used to do things. We need to start looking at getting people out of cars. It's my understanding that in the Sacramento region, 30% of greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation. So I'm urging that you put more into transit, get people out of cars, offer that opportunity for people to maybe not even own a car. I mean, I don't own a car, and I talk to young people about that possibility. And surprisingly, among young people, there's a lot of interest in not having the financial burden of private car ownership. So I would urge you to fund transit and try to get people out of cars. Listen to the SAC Move and SMART Coalition recommendations. They've done a lot of work. Let's try to cut our greenhouse gases so we can avoid the worst calamities for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Next speaker is Glenda Marsh, followed by Nollis Edwards. Apologize if I pronounce. Nolise Edwards, excuse me. Hi, Glenda.
Hi, it's Glenda Marsh with the Sacramento Metro Advocates for Rail and Transit. So I want to make clear for everybody, our coalition, Smart and SAC Moves, are not part of this compromise. We were not invited to the room. We have asked for meetings with the Alliance for Jobs. We have asked for meetings with members of the Public Works departments to talk with them in detail about our good ideas and the things that are important to the members of these coalitions. And that includes businesses, that includes labor, that includes environmental organizations and active transportation organizations and riders and members of the public that want to have more choices. They want to have safe streets. So all of the things that the voters said in their voter opinion poll were important to them, we're on it, and we do it better than what you have compromised on without us in the room. And you know what that says to all of us? That you don't think because we don't have all the money for your ballot measure campaign that we don't matter. And we do matter as stakeholders. And so we should be in those conversations and part of this deal. And that's exactly why we're here. That is exactly our goal. And you haven't provided that opportunity yet for us to do that. So we aren't there yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenda. Nolise Edwards.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Good
you. Hi.
afternoon. I'm named after my great grandmother, and she does pronounce it Nollis Jean. I got a little uppity, and I pronounce it Nolise. So my name is Nolise Edwards, and I am with the Sacramento Women and Girls Advancement Coalition, and we work on issues throughout the city and county that uplift and have an impact on women and girls. And so this issue was brought to our attention actually by Glenda and some others, talking about how this is important to women. And so although we don't have an official position on this, we did think it was important to make sure that we include an aspect that when you are looking at this plan and what you want to do moving forward, that is inclusive of the needs of women and girls. We did put a letter, I sent a letter earlier this week. I don't know if you all have it, but I will read a little bit of it as part of my presentation today, just in case. So again, my name is Nolise Edwards. I'm with the Sacramento Women and Girls Advancement Coalition. It's a nonpartisan coalition of women who have extensive and diverse community networks throughout the city of Sacramento. And the purpose of our coalition is to advance the economic prosperity, political power, and well-being of women and girls in the communities throughout the city. So our coalition firmly believes there is a nexus between transportation services and the fundamental viability to women and girls' ability to pursue education, good paying jobs, health care, and economic advancement. Women advancing their own and their families' well-being provide one of the most powerful engines of growth and opportunity for our communities. In a recent article, Making Public Transit Fair to Women Demands Way More Data, researchers who studied the mobility habits of women found that transportation systems are ill-suited to their needs. Most transit systems are not designed for women who face unique challenges related to personal safety, availability of transit schedules to support women with child care responsibilities and other issues that impede their transit mobility. As you all look and other stakeholders look to negotiate on the best plan to move forward, we feel it's important to prioritize and assess a transportation system that is inclusive of the needs of women and girls who utilize the system, and that the plan generates transportation options that are efficient, affordable, and safe. We encourage adoption of a forward-looking, seamless transportation network that is gender balanced, would reduce air pollution in neighborhoods, saving households thousands of dollars annually, and make walking, biking, and using public transit safe and convenient. A plan that includes these issues will not only benefit women and girls, it will improve the system for all communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Betsy Whalen and following Betsy is Michael Quigley. Oh, okay. Thank you, Betsy. Michael Quigley, and then next up is Sue Teranishi.
Thank you. My name is Michael Quigley. I'm the Executive Director with the California Alliance for Jobs. We are a labor management organization, represent the men and women who build and maintain our state's infrastructure. And our goal is really to go out and make sure that we can advance investments in public works, water, and transportation projects, and really make sure that we are maximizing both our opportunities and maximizing accountability for the public so that they know that our infrastructure dollars are going towards projects that help improve their lives in a bunch of meaningful ways. And I think that's one of the reasons why we are here today in support of the expenditure plan that's laid out. I think it does go far enough in many ways, probably not as far as all would like, but it does touch enough of the boxes and brings enough resources in enough different areas that I think it has a very, very good chance of passing. And that is a very important element of any transportation local expenditure plan campaign, is having the correct expenditure plan that meets the needs of the public. And a lot of times through the political process, you hear from different voices, but ultimately this is going to require a 2/3 vote of the entire county. And that's a high threshold. Last time it was attempted, it came up a little bit short, but if you recall back in 2004, Measure A was passed with over 70% of the vote. And I think that Sacramento County will vote for the right proposal. They will vote for the right plan if it has the right accountability. And we'd like to continue working with this body to make sure that Sacramento passes this measure in November. And the voters are ultimately going to be happy with the product and the fact when they see their roads and transit systems improve, their quality of life and their economy go stronger. Perhaps 40 years in the future, they'll be willing to vote for another one of these. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your engagement on this as well. Next up is Sue Teranishi, followed by Henry Lee. Good afternoon.
Hi. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Sue Teranishi, part of the Sac Moves Coalition, resident of the city of Sacramento. I wanted to thank you as the board in requesting information from SACOG and the Air District last week. I think it was really important information to hear. One of the things that especially struck me was Dr. Ayala's presentation and slide about public health and the fact that Sacramento region is still a non-attainment area for our clean air standard. And if you recall, the fact is that we're barely meeting the old clean air standard and nowhere near meeting the new stricter standards for clean air. So this is really a public health issue, that we are endangering the health of our residents if we don't act in a more proactive way to clean up our air. And as Mr. Corliss of SACOG mentioned, that in order to be competitive for future grants and make sure we don't lose future money, that we need to be showing that we're making progress on the goals of greenhouse gas emission reduction. And we need to pass a measure because we know we need more transportation money, but we need to be competitive for future grants, and showing that we're making progress is an important part of that, it seems. I also wanted to reference the polling, as Director Hansen mentioned, that two of the things that were mentioned or polled above 70% were the fix it. We all know we need to fix our roads, but also safe routes to school. That I think we all want to have our students, our youth, have safe access to schools, be it by walking or by bicycle. I think even more than that, we want to have safe routes to walk and bicycle to our parks, to our libraries, places that are close by but need improvements to allow children as well as seniors to get to places nearby. So in comparison to road improvements for sidewalks and bike infrastructure are so cheap. Why aren't we looking at building a great bicycle network in the community, which would take far less money than new road expansion? And let's do very proactive ways to get more people out of driving by making more transportation options easier, safer, just more convenient. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have Henry Lee, followed by Doug Thompson. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and the public. Thank you for your consideration of this item. Again, Henry Lee, General Manager, CEO of SACRT. We know that crafting an optimal balanced expenditure plan is not an easy exercise. And we are a highly diverse region with many viewpoints and opinions. We also know that there are so many infrastructure needs in our community and not enough money to do it all. I want to first thank Chair Darren Su for your strong leadership. Thank board subcommittee members for your great wisdom and a strong vision.
Ad hoc.
Ad hoc, yes. Good job. As well as thank Mr. Captain and the youth staff and our consulting team for the tireless efforts and unparalleled diplomacy to work with all stakeholders to craft a measure that strikes the appropriate balance to gain maximum support. Certainly, I would like to extend a heartfelt thanks to all the friends from SMART, SAC Moves, and various community groups that have advocated for more funding to address issues of climate change, congestion, and our region's poor air quality. You guys are the driving forces and the future of this region. Thank you. Similarly, I would like to thank the colleagues and the partners from Alliance for Job, Public Works Advisory Group, SACOG Air Quality District, and others for their strong partnership and earnest collaboration in developing this expenditure plan. While we knew this region is 3 to 5 times underfunded for our public transit system compared to our peer regions in West Coast. But we also know that many of our roadways are in dire conditions, and we cannot neglect those needs any further. This is why I'm here to support the proposed expenditure plan that has been brought forth by Mr. Campton today. It will address our poor road conditions, but also allow us to expand public transit to more communities, especially in the low-income and disadvantaged communities and suburban and underserved communities, providing more innovative mobility options to Sacramento residents. I believe it is important that we unite around today's vision. The more time we spend debating the details here in this room, the less time we have to communicate and educate the public about the wonderful things that the measure will allow us to accomplish. So again, thanks, board, for the consideration and the opportunity to share my thoughts.
Thank you, Henry. Really appreciate your engagement and work on this as well. Next up, we have Doug Thompson, followed by Kelly Cohen.
Good afternoon, directors. I definitely appreciate the opportunity. I think there's a good government question at work here. I think voters make ballot decisions in part on their perception of whether the government is being consistent, and that includes whether we're addressing the greenhouse gas and air quality mandates that we're obliged to meet under already adopted plans. I appreciated the presentation last week by James Corliss and Dr. Ayala, and I want to highlight just 3 statements from the report that accompanied that presentation. First, their report cites the extensive studies showing that roadway capacity projects without tolling or other user charges increase VMT per capita. So I want to ask you to be cautious about including projects that just set you up for having to spend more dollars later to mitigate more congestion as well as more emissions. Second, as also stated in the report, should the STA board wish to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, projects that convert commute trips to sustainable modes, and they suggest walking, biking, or transit, or accelerate the adoption of zero emissions vehicles or promote regional growth in low BMT areas, should be given priority. Third, and I'm quoting here, recognizing that 80% of trips are non-commute and most trips less than 6 miles, should the STA board wish to reduce criteria pollutants, projects that eliminate trips, such as walking, biking, and transit, should be given priority. There is a desire to reduce congestion. I certainly understand that, but there are also mandates to reduce certain pollutants, and both the health of our region's residents and secure access to state and federal transportation dollars depend on meeting those mandates. The statements I've highlighted address the mandates of 19% per capita reduction in greenhouse gases between 2005 and 2035 and meeting our ozone standards by 2024. And they suggest that those standards would be more likely to be achieved if the transportation expenditure plan was along the lines of what's been proposed by SMART and SAC Moves. CARB looked at the question of regional transportation plan expenditures by mode for all the MPOs in its 2018 progress report. They found that we're along the lines of the San Joaquin Valley MPOs and what proportion is going to roads. Going up to 50% on transit would match us better with other largely urbanized counties like San Diego County at 50%. The 4-county SCAG region is at 48%. The 9 counties of the Bay Area are at 64%. Their mode shares are higher, but that reflects what investments they have made. In an era of growing climate peril, and both extreme heat and higher flooding are likely results of that in this region, transformation is what is called for. And with your support, a new Measure A would help build a network that sustains the health of our children and the future vitality of Sacramento County. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Kelly Cohen, followed by Will Brieger. Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Kelly Cohen.
Hi.
And I live in Sacramento, unincorporated county. And my concern with Measure A has to do with funding of the American River Parkway. Currently, $1 million a year is going to county regional parks. In 2039, when that expires, there is no guarantee of that funding to continue. And I would like to ask that it does continue. It's a very important resource, that if that is in there as a guarantee, then we can be sure that it'll have a funding mechanism. Also, because the population is increasing, the need for more funding is going to be there too. When it comes to public transit, people like to take their own cars, even though they have to sit in traffic for a long time. And I know you're trying to improve public transit, but I think a more robust education aspect of it may help with that. I mean, if you look in Southern California, people are willing to spend hours sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic. And so a bus system like in San Francisco, you can go anywhere frequently. And I think educating people might also be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. And Director Kempton, could you just address Ms. Cohen's comment about the American River Parkway?
Well, again, I think everybody, and you've heard a lot of support from the board this afternoon regarding the American River Parkway, and we are looking for opportunities to be able to continue that funding beyond the 2039 date. And the apparent opportunity for us is through the extension of the Sacramento County Transportation Mitigation Fee Program. And if we go through the appropriate process and the American River Parkway is identified as a viable, eligible project, then the board and the the jurisdictions can determine how they would like to allocate those dollars. And as I mentioned earlier, we had recommended as part of this ordinance and TEP that at least $1 million be included out of that fee program for that purpose.
Thank you. In other words, it's in our thoughts, and we have a plan. Yeah. Next up, we have Will Brieger, and followed by Ashley Anderson. Good afternoon.
Mr. Chair and members. I'm Will Brieger. I'm a retired public servant and a county resident.
All right.
I'm also a member of 350 Sacramento. I'm focused on climate change. You all have a really complicated job. Surprise. But this is a great process. You're getting to weigh all kinds of different thoughts and factors and really values that people are bringing forward. I got here late today, so I didn't see anything particularly granular that I want to comment on. I just want to sort of highlight two factors. And these are things that align really well in my mind. One is that obviously our economy depends on smooth flowing roads. People need to get to work, to meetings, to come here, to move goods. And so everybody wants to see that work, our roads work better. The other thing is that air quality depends on fewer vehicles on the road, given our current technologies. So those two things line up very well if you think about moving people into other modes like transit. Transit that works, because sometimes it's not convenient. I'm out in the county and it's not convenient where I am, but I think with some investment that could happen. So I really like what the Smart SAC Moves Coalition suggested in one regard in particular, to use VMT as a key metric. So you can evaluate pretty much any expenditure on whether you're going to be taking people off the road or you're building new roads that are putting more people driving more miles. It's not that complicated. So I think that's a really good metric. We've only got, most people agree, 20 years to reduce our transportation emissions radically and revolutionarily. So I think that means that you all have to be really smart about every dollar you spend. And I think the community as a whole needs to be really smart about that. So I'm hoping that the process continues and you're getting all the information you need. After a century of road building that's gotten us where we are now, I'm hoping there'll be something different, or to quote from the draft I saw, transformative, which I hope you mean that. So I'm pleased to watch this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Next up, we have Ashley Anderson, followed by Walt Seifert.
Hello, my name is
Hi.
Ashley, and I'm from Folsom. I bike around Folsom a lot because I don't want to pollute in a gas-guzzling car, and I'm very concerned about the future of our planet and climate change. It's something I worry about every single day, and when I bike around Folsom and the Sacramento area, there's not a lot of great bike trails, or there's a lot of good bike trails, but not always good bike lanes. And sometimes I don't always feel safe around the bike lanes when there's lots of cars. So I think it's very important to put more funding into public trails and bike lanes and trails for pedestrians. I don't want to see more roads because that would increase pollution in our area. I would like to see an increase in funding to public transportation and also bike paths and bike trails. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Next up, we have Walt Seifert, followed by Inga Olson.
Good afternoon. I'm Walt Seifert with Sacramento TrailNet, and I want to talk about a couple things. One is the 60-40 split, and then flexibility in your plan. I realize it's difficult to split the pie, and there's all these competing needs. But I want to talk about the relative weights and the fairness and priorities of the split. Right now, 40% is going to transit and rail, and that's supporting about 2% of the trips in the region. Right now, an undefined amount is going to bike peds, and that's supporting 10% or more of the trips, at least in the city of Sacramento, far more in Midtown, where Director Hansen's district is. So I'm a bike ped guy. I believe in transit. We need more transit, but the most efficient way to spend money to get the most results quickly is for bike ped projects. And other speakers have talked about the ancillary benefits, health, reducing VMT. So to do things quickly, do them fast, in light of air quality concerns and greenhouse gas concerns, bike ped should be a priority in my belief. And the plan has goals for increasing transit and bike ped trips, but they aren't made numeric. So even Caltrans has set numeric goals of doubling pedestrian trips and tripling bike trips. And I think actually we may have passed the deadlines already for those without achieving those goals. But I would suggest that you consider establishing numeric goals for those trips. Secondly, I appreciate the flexibility in the plan now, having a 10-year review. But we're at least on the cusp of a revolution in transportation with autonomous vehicles and micro-mobility. It might be advisable to have a more frequent review than that, at least initially, during this next decade. So I think those are my major points. I appreciate your work on this plan, and I hope we are impressing you with the concerns of the community, especially concerning greenhouse gases and the air quality. Thanks very much.
Absolutely, thank you. Next up, we have Inga Olson, and my last speaker is Zach Miller. Please sign up or submit a form if you would like to speak. Hi.
Hi. I'm a Sacramento County resident, and there was 4 points that are important to me that I wanted to make that are relevant to your decision. One is an armada of electric buses that reduce congestion through the Cal Expo bottleneck, or instead of constructing a connector, achieves twin objectives. Simultaneously, it reduces congestion and it reduces greenhouse gas, and then of course there's the bonus that it's cost effective. The decision that you make today will probably be the most important decision of your life, I believe. Because the longer we wait to reduce carbon, the challenge grows exponentially. Children understand the terrifying nature of that equation. Also, 10 years from now, people will say, why didn't they move more aggressively? The problem was crystal clear. Lastly, you have a group of people who don't want a tax increase. It's important to address greenhouse gas and public transportation adequately so that you have the environmental and climate justice people voting for Measure A. On another note, I want to say that the Sacramento County League of Women Voters last night voted to support SAC Moves and SMART's principles and proposals, and you'll be receiving a letter to that effect probably today. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, we have Zach Miller. It's our last speaker who signed up to speak.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I'm a little late to this process, but the benefit of that is I get to look at this with fresh eyes, like a voter would. And I really think that this plan would be improved greatly with some more clarity and certainty with respect to the active transportation dollars. I think Director Hansen kind of alluded to that earlier. And I think that's an element that's currently missing, and that I would encourage the board to work with staff on making that clear to voters. In particular, active transportation dollars are essential for the investments in RT and public transit. We know that if you ride transit, like a lot of us do, you're almost certainly walking to or from a stop, riding to or from a stop. And so it's essential that those expenditures, there's a synergy, if you will, and that they line up and work with each other. Secondly, in the polling, not only did we see a lot of interest in pedestrian safety, we also saw a lot of interest in air quality, and that's an issue that affects all of us. It affects every single resident in your jurisdictions, and it's one that I think we have to have foremost in our minds as you develop the plan and the ordinance. So I think the best way of doing that is, as has been previously stated, make VMT reduction an essential element in evaluating expenditures. That's the only way that we're going to, in my mind at least, make serious reductions in air pollution and improvements in air quality for all of your constituents. And with that, I thank you for your focus on those issues. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, that was our last speaker. I'm going to bring it back to the board here for any comments. Okay, and before I go to Director Guerra, I just want to say, as Director Kempton, Executive Officer Kempton mentioned earlier, this is informational. I know a lot of you, these board members are just seeing this information for the first time. So we are going to obviously let everything kind of percolate, if you will, and then we'll come back for another public meeting to entertain more comments about it. Okay, Director Guerra.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. One, I clearly want to thank you and also our staff for where we are today. Clearly listening from the testimony from the public that traffic congestion reduction, improving our air quality are not only critical for our local health, for addressing climate change, and for just the sheer competitiveness of leveraging federal and state dollars. What came to me here is, again, the message that we have to start thinking differently. We've got to be thinking more creatively. And maybe not so much for this body here, but it made me think when Ms. Nolise Edwards brought up the issue of our diversity of riders, of women and of families, and the fact that if we are trying to get fewer vehicles out, we have to think differently in all angles. And maybe this is more a conversation for the RT board, but you can't take a stroller onto a bus, and if you do, you have to collapse it. So when we're thinking about what it takes for us to think differently about climate change, to reducing our vehicles, to making easier access to bike lanes, to pedestrian crossings, we've got to start thinking, I think, from that different lens. I do think, again, it's critical that we fund our air district appropriately to address the regional need that we need for our region. We all benefit from that region. And I think that where we're moving forward here is very positive. This work from the ad hoc, I want to thank the ad hoc because I think it's a significant step forward to address the strategic needs that we need for our region. So those are just some thoughts I wanted to share with you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Thank you very much to the staff as well.
Thank you. Director Gatewood.
All right, thank you. Thank you to the chair for putting this all together. I know it's hard to herd all us cats into one good group, especially me. I'm feral. Thank you to Will for putting this all together. I know you got it laid on your lap, and I know this isn't an easy lift. And thank you to the ad hoc group. Couple quick points that basically I see. Rancho Cordova is going to give $619 million to this, of which we're going to be able to take back less than 41% back to my citizens. So of what we're willing to give in, and Rancho Cordova has never been one of those groups to say no for doing our heavy lifting as a city. We're willing to donate money. But when I have even with my projects and the road projects and what's done on the STA, I'm still only taking back 41%. So for every dollar we put in, 41 cents comes back to my city. And if you're talking fairness, that's not fair. That's less than fair. That's less than 40%. That's a D minus. The next part is we had a working formula of 70 to 30%, and we're looking at ways to get money into this. I feel bad for the organizations that are saying yes to this, because if you're looking at the percentage of which chance this passes, the things that are less than 20% are getting 40% of the money. And we want something to pass. I'm not against having a tax. I know my roads are bad. The county roads that butt right up against Rancho Cordova have some places are zero, which means they're rolling on dirt. And we need to get these roads fixed. I do believe I want something green. I want clean air. I want to give that to my kids. I don't know if light rail and train are the way. I mean, I think more electronic vehicles are probably going to be the thing that takes over with autonomous, because then there is no carbon footprint. It's electric cars. And I think that's what's more likely, because we want to think outside the box. We got to get more creative. Autonomous vehicles with stuff like that. But I'm not here for that. I'm here to get a bill that's going to pass. Mm-hmm. So the things that want to pass would be, I mean, if we really want to do this, 83% said senior and transportation, yet that happens to be one of the smallest percentages. Roads and fixing are 60 to 70%. And we still don't have that that's a 60% people said, I want that fixed first. That's what we have to get people's trust in that. And then the least of it was the RT. And I like RT. It's in our city. We have over 5 stops, I believe. And yet we have less than 1% of our citizenry that gets on it. And I don't know how to fix that problem. And I don't know how we're going to get them out of their cars. I don't. But I do know that the way the bill is built right now, 1, it's not fair to Rancho and not fair to a lot of the smaller cities. And 2, it's not going to pass. So I implore my group, like, I know you want 60 to 40%, but 70-30 was only 6,000 votes away from passing. If we get closer or back to that number, I know it has a chance of passing, and Rancho's support. Right now, I'm concerned that we have to go out with our own ballot measure to be able to get the money to fix our own roads. I mean, I don't want to be I feel like I'm the canary in the coal mine. We did the report, we took the numbers, we saw what it was supposed to say, and yet the thing that's coming back isn't the thing that's going to allow us to pass. I mean, I want to be a team player. I want to be able to fix our roads. I want 80. I want, the air quality. I definitely want the parkway fixed. This is all stuff that butts right into Rancho. But the way we're patching out the money and the way this percentage is, none of our citizens are going to pass it. And we're going to end up losing. And then that's another 2 to 4 years where Rancho doesn't have the money to fix its roads. And I got to go explain to people why we have potholes. And I put all of our money and interest in something that didn't pass. I just really feel like we need to go back to something that was within 1% of passing. And yes, I understand things have changed. And I understand, but in my city, stuff hasn't changed that much. So that's where I feel. Thank you.
Okay, Director Serna.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to start by thanking everyone that, again, joined us in chambers, took time out of their busy schedules to be here and share with us your perspective. I want to thank Will and his staff and our chair for all the work that they've been doing. I'm going to try and avoid some of the comments I've made in past meetings on the subject, but I guess where I want to start is, like so many other things that we are asked to do in the course of our duties to represent the constituencies that we do, is I think it's a constant marriage of moral conviction combined with really hearing from our constituents what their desires are, and that's not always easy. In fact, I would say it's mostly not easy. It's very, very difficult sometimes. On this particular issue, I think the point that Steve Cohn made earlier really resonated with me, and that had to do with the fact that we'd be going out to the voters with a split that's going the other direction, and here we are in a condition globally and locally that is even more challenging when it comes to the better understanding that we now have about the threat of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. And so not just from a political standpoint, but I think a very practical one when we're talking about what is equitable ultimately to put in front of the voters, I think we have to be very honest with ourselves about what the reasons would be why we go ahead with that split the way it's been presented today, at least, given the fact that we have VMT challenges and we have carbon emission challenges. And again, wearing the hat as a CARB member, that really does resonate with me quite a bit. I was very pleased to hear from a number of constituents that underscored the value of active transportation. And it's not just a throwaway, it should not be considered a throwaway element to this. In fact, I would argue, again, compared to where we were with the original measure, active transportation has actually become even more prevalent in our society, has become an even greater component part of kind of our mobility sets. And so when I mentioned earlier the import of the American River Parkway, again, it's not just a reference to the ecosystem of the parkway or its overall general recreational attributes. For me, it is a legitimate, very important part of our transportation network. And I think if we do just the status quo compared to what we have done in the past with the original measure, that sends a particular message that I'm not interested in sending, quite frankly. I think we need to actually take this moment and be bolder on that particular part of our assets in terms of regional and the transportation system here in the county. So those are my thoughts. I know this is being presented today for information. It certainly gives all of us, including those in front of us, something to think about and consider. The fact that we had a few speakers mention that they're feeling alienated or left out of the process bothers me. I don't think we can move forward with that in that kind of relationship, quite frankly, with those that, again, take time to advocate with a lot of thoughtfulness on this important subject. So I would hope that moving forward, we take very seriously those concerns as they've been expressed here today and via email and other means. We have to make sure this is as inclusive throughout the entirety of the process as possible. And I'll end there. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Stern. Vice Chair Natoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too want to just compliment the work that's gone into this thus far, and certainly all the comments we received today. I guess with a great acknowledgement for the ad hoc committee work and all the other input we've received, I want to just ask this of Will. Will, I think, what I hear certainly up here at the dais, but also in the community, that there are points of departure, and again, you work to your best ability, and certainly with the leadership of members of the committee and others, to try to find that point where compromise would bring us to some settlement around a measure and what would be elements that would be included, and obviously those things that would be chosen that might not be included in there, at least to the degree that people would like to see something more. And their support, certainly for going forward, may very well hang on that. I guess my question is, and again, and maybe it's no from the start, but have any measures ever gone with an either-or proposal? Again, recognizing where we're at, and I guess I'm curious as to your knowledge, Will, and again, it's not to compound this any more, or certainly take any focus off of the hard work to try to find that middle ground. But if a few weeks from now we come to a point where, and again, I'll just speak from experience, where we were in the last measure, where it looked like we were going to have a major split, although a measure might go forward, but in trying to find consensus around that, we hear from different elements of the community. We've seen the polling. We've heard from advocates from a variety of vantage points. To your knowledge, Will, has there ever been that question before? It still would require 2/3, but maybe to the point that we can't find agreement here, albeit different views. Maybe present those to the voters and say, okay, here's what people represent this as being on the cusp of this or that, and present that measure if we can't find agreement here. I guess I'm just curious about that.
Director Natoli, we have 24 self-help counties in California None of those have ever been presented, and there's several that have gone away as well. So we probably have had 30 or so of these initiatives around the state over the years. None of those have offered an either-or option, and I would suspect that the achievement of the 2/3 vote requirement in that event would be even more difficult than it is just out of the gate.
Right. And I hadn't thought, again, recognize the 2/3 would be there, and I think there's some practical challenges. Again, I asked that because, again, you know, I think the imperative here is for us to either figure out if it's a go or no go, and what that's going to look like if it's a go. I'm not discounting any of the hard work that's occurred thus far, but that will occur over the next few weeks. But assuming we come down to a point here where we have a serious division in the House here, that doesn't reflect well from the standpoint of then having to go back to respective councils and before the Board of Supervisors to have those discussions further, and to do that in a short time frame, again, that you've laid out very clearly for us. So I just, I wanted to ask that question. I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Director Chenier.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple things I want to say. First of all, Will, I want to thank you. You've worked through pneumonia. I'm not sure which is worse, these meetings or the ad hoc meetings or the pneumonia. Right. But your work is very much appreciated, and I also want to note the good job that our chair has done, both here and on the ad hoc committee. I got to say, if you had asked me 3 weeks ago if this was ever going to get to a place where we were on the same page or close enough to the same page to move it forward, I would have said no. This is one of the more complicated and most difficult pieces of political work that I've been involved with. You have so many variables here. You've got obviously roads versus transit, specific projects that people like or don't like. Within all the categories, there are also difficulties as well. So, you know, this is clearly a case where if everyone walked away happy, you'd be living in a different world, because that's just not going to happen. Right. But the fundamental question for me is, do we need the funding, and do we need to move forward? I want to really commend RT and Regional Transit and Henry for the amazing work that they've done. We never would have thought about going 60/40 on Measure B because Regional Transit didn't deserve the money at that point. But I think that the amount of money and doing this over 40 years, just the volume of dollars, really gives us something to work with on the Regional Transit Board to move that system forward. Would I love to get to 50/50 or even more on that? Yes, but I don't think that happens, and I don't think that garners enough support across the county for us to move this forward. Are we doing enough for roads? If you listen to a number of members on this board, you would say no, that we're not doing enough there either. So, you know, and are all the municipalities getting back everything they put in? I think the answer is yes, even though the percentages are a little bit different. But when you look at, and I did a little work on Rancho, Mr. Gatewood, because of your comments at the last meeting. If you look at Golden One Arena, 3% or about 500 people live in Rancho and come to the arena. The average commute out of Rancho is 24 minutes. So those folks are using our roads. They are coming downtown, and I think this is an opportunity for us to think regionally as well as protect our own jurisdictions. I'm supportive of where we are. There are things that I would like to see differently, but I don't think that gets us to the point where we can come to an agreement. My hope is that we can come to an agreement. I think there are a couple of pieces still to be worked out. American River Parkway, certainly. We have great challenges there, but it is an amenity that we have in Sacramento that very few people in the country have. We need to take care of. Putting a little bit of more money, as Mr. Guerra said, into the air quality district is something I think that we're working on, and we have a few more weeks to do this. So as someone who sits on RT, SACOG, and STA, this is tough stuff, and I want to appreciate everyone who's been in the audience, all the stakeholders who have come forward over time. Again, not everyone is going to be happy, but my hope is that everyone will get to the point where they can support, because this is something that is desperately needed by this region to fix the roads that we have, and also to continue to increase our public transit as we move forward. I also want to remind people, and Mr. Kempton did a little bit of work on other sources of funding. This is not the only source of funding for transportation in our region. We're building a bike trail that SACOG was able to give us $10 million for, that people will get from Florin all the way, or Pocket all the way downtown. So we have a lot of pieces of the puzzle between SB1 and other grant opportunities. We should think of those as well as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Harris.
Thank you, Chair Soon. I'd like to also thank everybody who's worked on this. This has been over a year of effort of the ad hoc committee and all the players who have come to the table to try to solve some of our transportation issues. I've said this before, but this transportation measure is not going to solve global climate change. It's not going to solve everything that we need to do about active transportation. It's not going to solve a lot of problems, but it can have a very positive effect on all of the above. A measure like this can never be perfect in everything to all people, and if everybody leaves the table feeling a little disgruntled, we probably did a good job. It is, as Director Chenier said, it's very hard to pass a 2/3 measure, and so there's obviously going to be a lot of compromises involved. You know, perhaps some people feel like they don't have a seat at the table, but I tend to disagree with that. I have met with virtually every group that wanted to speak about this measure, and everything that they've brought, certainly to discussions with myself, has affected where I wanted to go with this on the committee. But there are many jurisdictions involved here, all with different issues that they want to solve. The proposal that we brought forth today, I think is actually a pretty good work product overall. And although I'm not omniscient, like perhaps another member of the board is, I can't tell you exactly that it won't pass or that it will pass, but I think it has a very good possibility of passing. This amount of money can create a lot of good. And while we haven't prescribed exactly how it will be spent in each category, it's that flexibility that we need moving forward as modes of mobility do change in the future. A lot of people are adopting electric vehicles, and a lot more will in the near future. You know, we can't prognosticate today on how greenhouse gases are evolved today exactly what's going to happen in 5 years. There are going to be many changes, and so I think that flexibility built into the measure is a very good thing. You know, and as Director Chenier said, there are other pots of money by which to affect change. For instance, I'm trying to build a trail that was also funded basically by SB1. And then we have the American River Parkway Conservancy that can do an awful lot of good on the parkway. So to think that this measure is the place to focus all of our attention on policy and prescription of funds, I think is perhaps a mistake. This is really a huge amount of compromise built over a year and across many jurisdictions. I think that we have a chance of passing this, and I think we have a great need to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Director Kennedy.
Thank you, Chair, and I too want to echo my appreciation for the work that you've done on this. It's been a huge lift, and you've done a great job.
Thank you.
A few things I just want to point out. First of all, I won't repeat everything that Director Chenier and Director Harris said, but to say I agree with everything that you said. Regarding, for Director Cerna, you're absolutely right. We have to make this as big a tent as possible, and we have to have everybody at the table. But I will take exception at the assertion that SMART and SAC Moves has not been at the table. They are one of the few organizations that actually directly addressed the ad hoc committee. I myself, and I know others sitting at this dais, have had many meetings with them, and every time we do that, we take back to this body as well as the ad hoc committee what their comments are, and they are a part of the discussion. So that's just patently false. As far as local jurisdictions keeping every dollar or cent that they raise, that's just bad public policy. First of all, I do believe that the regional aspects of this are being discounted. You can't tell me that every jurisdiction isn't going to benefit from better roads throughout the county. You can't tell me that every jurisdiction is not going to benefit from the money that's going to the Air Quality Management District. You cannot tell me that every jurisdiction in this county will not benefit from the work that's going on a regional asset that is the American River. And you cannot tell me that every jurisdiction doesn't benefit from the interchanges and the improvements on Capital City Freeway. So that's just not an argument that I can buy. And finally, to kind of agree again with Mr. Harris, you know, I've been saying for 2 years when we've talked about this process that at the end of the day, my hope is we come up with something that is good for our community, good for our constituents, good for the county for a very long time to come, but something that nobody hates, yet nobody loves. And I think we've reached that agreement here through a lot of work, and I think that there's still some tweaking that can happen in the next couple of weeks, but we're in a good place. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Howell.
I'll just start off with I agree with most of what Jay said and most of what Jeff said and most of what Patrick said.
I'll take most.
Most of it. And no, I said that. I said Jeff. I'm just going to add that, you know, I was sitting on this board, as was Mr. Cohn sitting on this board in 2004, and the split in 2004 was 60-40. Okay, so as you're aware, some numbers ended up getting moved around at the end of the day. Measure B did not pass at 70-30. Might have been close, but it didn't pass. So I think I'm going to venture to guess that most of the people that are sitting in the center of this room would prefer that it be 60% public transportation, bike and ped, and 40% roads. Other people that are not sitting in this room would probably include it, you know, go along with Mr. Gatewood and suggest that it should be 70-30. I think, I don't personally believe that it passes at that rate. Might have a better shot at passing in Folsom, but I'm going to count on the fact that people are looking at the bigger picture, and as has already been said by probably 4 or 5 of my colleagues here, if everybody leaves here not fully happy, we've probably done the right thing. And if I remember correctly, I think I said that in our last meeting about Measure B when we approved that transportation expenditure plan a few years ago. So, and I'll agree with Patrick Kennedy as well about the meetings. I've, you know, some of the people that were saying that they hadn't had the opportunity to meet, anybody that called me, I met with them. So, this is vitally important to the region. With regard to money going back to the individual jurisdictions, I believe that Folsom actually gets the least percentage back based on the sales tax that's generated in the city of Folsom. However, you have to keep in mind that everybody benefits from the connector, everybody in the region benefits from carpool lanes, everybody benefits from the Cap City Freeway project, and everybody benefits from the additional money that is going into public transit, RT in particular. You know, just the changes in the last year with RT, bus ridership is up significantly, in large part because we now give students free passes. We think, and the people on the RT board believe, that that's going to go a long way. Once those kids have learned how to ride a bus or learned how to ride public transit, they'll keep doing that. And, you know, they'll do that for the rest of their lives. And that is, over the long term, that's going to be a shift of those, you know, current school-age children to maybe become one of those kids that once they're in college and they move to Midtown Sacramento, they don't own a car 20 years from now. So I think at the end of the day, everybody has to get behind this, even if it's not the ideal situation for each one of us personally. We have to get behind it because what's good for the region is good for everybody and every jurisdiction within the region.
Thank you, Director Sandu. I apologize, I accidentally hit your button off, but Director Sandu.
Thank you for the chair, give me the opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Campton. You spent a lot of time on that plan, and also thank you for all the ad hoc committee. I don't know who was on the ad hoc committee because I joined this body a little bit late. So thank you for the ad hoc committee. You know, spend a lot of time, and I do also thank you for all the public comment. They bring a good question, what we need in this this whole county or on a city level. Air quality is very important for everybody, for me, and same thing environmental. But the Measure A is something we really want to pass. I believe in, I'm going to make a very quick comment. I believe in the survey say is most important thing we need street roads and potholes repair. The other transit is also very very important for us too. But in order to pass the measure, we need to something which is in a survey. Most likely, the survey can be same. These people, these citizens of this county or the city, they can vote for the measure. So this is my opinion, we like to make something is feasible, is the voter can say, okay, we can vote, so we can vote 2 1/3 vote. It's very hard to pass the vote, but if our direction is a little bit different way than the survey said, it maybe is hard to pass that measure. And the same thing like in 60%, I like to a little bit more, but it's ad hoc committee already working hard. And then also it's very important too, we represent each district. Some jurisdiction is transit pro, and some jurisdiction, same thing. I'm from represent my constituents. Is very important to repair roads and roads and street. So that's I say that's it. That's why this is kind of my opinion is. Thank you.
Thank you. I just also want to take a moment to again thank Will Kempton for his very hard work, and as Director Scheer mentioned, he literally did work through pneumonia on this effort, so that should be noted. I want to thank all the ad hoc committee members and the input that we received from all the stakeholders. Also want to highlight the compromise that was reached, at least from 2 organizations, the California Alliance for Jobs, and representing a lot of the people who do the work on our roads and railways, as well as General Manager Henry Lee of RT. A lot of folks, this room I think probably recognizes, but maybe the general public was not aware that Mr. Lee won an award for being the best transit manager in the nation recently, and so with that, I do take his input seriously. If he's on board, if he wasn't, that would give me great pause. But to say, having said that, I know there, as my colleagues have mentioned here, it's not a perfect plan. I do think it's a good compromise that can move the needle. The concerns of the residents about climate change, about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, shifting transportation modes is not lost on anyone up here, as much as the needs for road improvements. But systems change is hard. Right? Systems change because of that inertia that wants to keep it going in the same direction, and that is felt when you hear people talk about whether this measure will pass. That's the inertia, right? We want to be bold, but would it actually pass because of the existing system? What I think we have here is a start of a multimodal measure that can move the needle in these critical areas of shifting modes, air quality, improving our transit, reducing traffic on our roadways and our highways, and leveraging these critical local dollars that will stay local, but leveraging those monies for state and federal funds that can give greater benefit in the region and over a longer period of time. So I also want to address Director Cerna's comment about inclusiveness. We do want to be that bigger tent, as Director Kennedy mentioned. Mr. Kempton, we have one more ad hoc coming. Is there one more ad hoc before?
We do, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
And if you, on the last item today, which is the confirmation of this special meeting, if we can move that meeting from February 19th, which is next Wednesday, to the following Wednesday, then we can backfill that time slot with another ad hoc meeting.
An ad hoc, okay. So let's do that. And we're not gonna, I can appreciate we may not reach everybody, but I did hear, I'm happy to, because it's an opportunity for actual engagement and not just at the podium. I'm happy to welcome, if Smart and SAC Moves representatives want to come in and talk again, as well as I heard 350 earlier in the comment as well, or frankly, any of the organizations that that reached out today. Let's see if we can accommodate. I don't know about time and all, but let's just see if there's an interest. Happy to talk to them during that time. And then would like, because we didn't have a chance, but if you could add that detail that Director Hume mentioned earlier, so that we have, the plan updated. Let's get that updated, and then any changes to the ordinance that we're talking about today, so that can be presented at the next public meeting on the 26th. I think that we can schedule it that way, and then final action on the measure, March 12th meeting.
March 12th.
That's right.
Scheduled date.
Okay. I'm gonna. I'm sorry, Director Hume. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Chair. I want to question that last point that you were just making about having an additional ad hoc committee meeting and having additional presentations. At some point, there has to be a plan presented that this body can negotiate and make decisions on. I had the 19th on my calendar for the next meeting here in these chambers. I don't know if the 26th will work for me or not, but when do we pull the Band-Aid off and say, here's what we're going to talk about and discuss, or is this, the goalpost constantly changing?
No, we're not. March 12th. That's it. March 12th is final action.
So what would be the purpose of the meeting on the 26th then?
To have public dialogue after any other comments, tweaks. There's some possible discussions about further details on the plan, that refinement, I should say. I think that we've worked out at least a boilerplate and outline of an expenditure plan. I think there's some minor tweaks that it would serve the ad hoc to discuss, to be able to bring back.
So I appreciate your point, but I'm just going to say here, and I held my comments back because I don't know yet where I stand on this plan, because I've just seen this plan today.
Absolutely.
And,
yep.
and for me, that's a problem with the process. And that is that we have concentrated the decision-making power down into this ad hoc committee. And so at some point, we have to have something that we discuss as a full body and make the tweaks in the open chambers with full input. And so as I understood it, the ad hoc committee voted to move this plan forward. In other words, their work has concluded, and we are now moving this up to the full body. What was the 7-1 vote? We led this meeting with Mr. Kempton saying there was a 7-1 vote.
The outline of the expenditure plan, but there's some additional details that could stand some additional work in the ad hoc for, to your point, final public full engagement on the 26th, and then final action on the 12th. So full public. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
I think one of the things that is still left to be done is the issues that have been talked about frequently this afternoon, and the additional funding for the American River Parkway. There's the issue of the Air District. There's a number of details that we need to bring back to you so that you have that on the table. And the 26th works out from a standpoint of the workload and being able to get to that point of that information coming to you. So my recommendation to you would be that on the 26th we would present, a sort of a final plan with some of these other issues addressed, language, for example, that Director Cerna has asked for relative to the issues along the parkway. We can bring back a clean document that is then before you, and you will have a chance, and the public would have a chance to comment on that, and then bring the document back for final adoption on the 12th of March.
Okay. Just ideologically speaking, and I'm only one vote, Director Cerny is only one vote, and as has been mentioned, the ultimate consideration is whether or not this measure passes. I think there has been good movement to align the expenditure plan more closely with what the poll results have shown us, And if we continue to tweak, we're going to lose that momentum, I think, and it's going to go the wrong way. And
We are not going backwards, but the tweaks are not intended to go backwards. But there are some details that still need to be addressed. And as highlighted earlier, this is a very complex process with a lot of things. We definitely we need to compartmentalize some of these conversations in terms of the overall expenditure plan, this issue about the American River Parkway, and there's some other details in the ordinance that we need to work out. Director Frost.
I just wanted to also add that I had a small question of Mr. Kempton before the meeting tonight regarding the excise tax. I didn't remember the prior Measure A having an excise tax. It looks like it's a small amount, but I'm not sure I understand what the excise tax is and how that plays into the allocation to the different jurisdictions, and can it be changed? And I just want to better understand that. Did we have excise tax in the prior Measure A?
The language that has been incorporated into this measure, and council can make, if council knows the answer to that, he can respond to as well. But this language was in the previous ordinance, and it was in the ordinance for the existing Measure A. So it was just brought forward. As I indicated to you, Director Frost, I will talk to the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, and we'll get an answer to the question.
And does it go to
relative
them or to us, or, okay,
Right.
yeah. Thank you.
Vice Chair Natoli.
Just very quickly, the last meeting we had a presentation from the transportation management entities. I didn't see any further discussion. Maybe it's been too soon. It was only a week ago, but I would like to see whatever discussion took place, either staff level and or ad hoc subcommittee. And I would also just suggest that certainly today's conversation has been very important, and the work's been very important. But I'm going to go back to the point that I asked about earlier, and as I've kind of reflected on it throughout the course of the 2 hours here today, that this notion of fix it first, but maybe some consideration for the worst first, wherever that's at. And 5 years is not going to get even to the point of some of the worst, wherever that is in county or cities. And so I guess I'd like to at least have some consideration of that, because I would just say that would be pretty important in the conversation when we get down to brass tacks on March 12th. Thanks.
Okay. Anything more with the schedule? Are we good? Okay. Any other comments from the board members? All right. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.